Chat and Learn here with PowerToFly. My name is Mariella Marie, and today is a very special day for me because we have an awesome guest speaker that I've tied myself down to the chair because I don't want to fly away. I'm so excited. This is a dear friend of mine, and she's about to drop so much knowledge. I've learned so much from her over the years. So I'm really, really honored to host this next hour. Before we get started, I want to go over some housekeeping rules so that everyone feels comfortable and confident, and we can really make use of this next hour. It's going to fly by like this, you're going to see. So I'll give everyone a 10-minute warning when we've got about 10 minutes left, just in case you haven't had time to come off mute or write in the chat box. With that said, I've muted everyone upon entrance just to avoid any background noise, but I can't stress enough, we want to hear from you. So feel free to unmute yourselves if you had a dream last night and you want to add that to the conversation. If you want our guest speaker to dive in deeper on these questions that you all have submitted offline. And I know we might be getting into some sensitive topics. Again, there's no judgment here. We want to hear you speak your voice and live your truth. But if you need to keep anything private, you can find me anonymously in the chat box under Mariella. You can write to me privately and I'll flag that to our guest speaker. The last thing I'll say is if you come off mute, you will be featured in our video that you can rewatch on PowerToFly. And I invite everyone to be present. I know that we live in a world where everyone is multitasking, but I invite you to be present with us so that you really maximize this hour. And then you can rewatch the video later on PowerToFly. With that said, last thing I'll say is follow us on socials and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can keep up with all the great chats we've got lined up. And I'm going to now pass the mic to my dear friend, my sister from another. We had the beautiful opportunity to meet here in Argentina when she was living here in Argentina. Now she's calling from Norway. And so Vivica, let us know a little bit about yourself and let us know whatever you're excited to share with us today. Let us know how you came to know about PowerToFly. I know that I introduced you to PowerToFly, but go ahead and let us know a little bit more. And then we'll roll right into this next hour with some awesome questions that everyone has submitted offline. So I'll pass the mic to you, V.
Thank you, Mariella. I'm super excited to be here as well. And especially doing it with you. And I was looking through everyone who has their videos on. I'm super grateful because that means that feels like we have more of a face-to-face conversation. I'm super excited about this topic that we're going to talk about. And I'm really hope and encouraged that you can submit some questions and thoughts, because I hope that this can be more of a conversation rather than me, because no one's an expert on motherhood and no one's an expert on doing this. This is just my experience in my life and the things that I have sort of learned from my motherhood experience. And I think that in the world, we have far little conversation about the real emotion and growth and transformational power of motherhood, of birth, of the postpartum period, all of that. It's much more on how to get your child to sleep, how to do that. So please join in. I am from Norway. I am an anthropologist and host of many other things as well. And I also do coaching. So I'm multi-passionate about many things. So I grew up in Norway in this little town called Sandefjord. It's on the south coast of Norway. So winters were cold and long and summers were warm and lovely. And we used to cycle to the beach every summer. And a lot of people don't know that about Norway. They think that we live with polar bears and it's dark all the time. But it's not. But now it is. We're moving into winter. And the traveler in me wants to leave, but COVID prevents that. So that's an interesting space to be in. So I grew up in this town and it was pretty small. It was very... lots of sports. It was really safe. I had loving parents. I have two younger sisters, and there's, to me, felt like a lot of sameness. And as anyone, I grew up thinking that everyone spoke Norwegian, or English, or whatever country you come from. You think that everyone in the world speaks your language. I later found out that my language is an obscure little secret language that I now have. So that's beautiful. As I got older, I could travel. And as soon as I could travel, I moved out. Not because things were bad, because they weren't. I had a very good upbringing, but I felt like all the sameness. I couldn't find my tribe. I was longing for real conversations, for otherness, for different perspectives, for to figure out how I can fit in all of this sort of energy for discovering the human experience. So I used the opportunity to travel and studied abroad. I lived in many places in England, and I studied in India, and then in another town in Norway. And and just like spent the time traveling and living abroad and feeling the different experiences. And I eventually ended up with doing my master's degree in anthropology in London. And then I started working for the Red Cross. So I worked for the Red Cross both in Norway and then also in Nepal. And later after that, I moved to Argentina because I wanted to learn Spanish. Then I fell in love with Buenos Aires, and I fell in love with a man, and I met amazing soulmate friends such as Mariella. And it was just such a great experience. And so I kept coming back and doing other things. And then when I was 34, I traveled back to Argentina and I bought an apartment. And then I got pregnant with my girl, who is now nearly 6, just a few weeks shy of 6. So she's a Scorpio girl. And so I was 34 when I had her. Her name is Ava. And that changed everything, obviously, and the way I travel, the way I live. And it sort of catapulted me towards really wanting to do the things that I wanted to do. So when I was working for the Red Cross, I loved it. There were so many things about that, the different the jobs that I had that I really loved. But it just didn't feel right the way I was doing it. And so becoming a mom, I became much more relentless in, okay, but what do I really want? What gives me energy? And so with Ava, I have traveled. We traveled a lot. We traveled to India, Italy, France, Denmark, and we went to San Francisco, the longest flight with a little baby who didn't want to sleep, and Miami. And then we've lived together in Buenos Aires, and we've lived together in Bali now recently. So as you can get, that was like a little introduction so that I'm not so, I don't know, scary or unfamiliar to you, but I live my life in seasons and in searches and transformations. And I think you can still continue to do that even when you have a child, even when you become a mom. And I'm really like adamant that it's a good thing, you know, if it's something that calls you. If it's not, then, you know, then don't. But for me, it definitely is. And I would imagine that everyone who's on this chat has some sort of interest in travel or entrepreneurship or living a little bit outside the box somehow.
Yes, thank you, V. That's such a great introduction. I know we're going to learn way more about you throughout this next hour. So with that said, I'm just going to give a little shout out to where we are in the world, because I know that you have this, you know, this spirit of learning about yourself by, you know, being in different places in the world and being, I love that you said being relentless and owning your truth and finding your passion. So we've got folks calling from all over. I'm calling from Argentina. We've got some more folks in Buenos Aires. We've got Michigan. We've got Norway, Spain, North Carolina. So if you're just joining us, go ahead and write in the chat box where you're calling from. And with that said, you all have submitted some great questions offline. We're going to take these questions one by one throughout the next hour. And I just really, you know, want to say thank you for being with us for this hour, because we know there's a lot of crazy things going on in the world and you could be doing anything else, but you're here with us. So again, let's maximize this time and let's make this, you know, a dialogue between all of the people that are on the call today. So with that said, I'll just go ahead and let's get the chat box warmed up. Let us know where you are in your journey. I personally don't have kids, but I have nieces, and I really want to learn more about how I can be more involved as a community member, right? As a global citizen, on how I can do my part, even though I don't have kids. So, you know, if you don't have kids and you're on this call, if you do have kids, if you're thinking about kids, if you don't want your kids anymore, it's okay. Let us know. Be real, write it in the chat box. No one is going to ostracize you. So let us know where you are in the world. Where you are in the world, yes, and where you are in your journey. And then we will take these questions one by one. And V, I call Viveka V because, well, I like calling her that. So feel free to call her V, or you can call her Viveka. And we'll take these questions one by one. If you see your question come up on the screen, again, feel free to unmute yourselves or write in the chat box. If this wasn't your question and you want to add your 2 cents, or you want to add a dream that you had last night, I can't stress enough, we want to hear from you. So V, let's take this first question here. Since having kids, I find it harder to focus and I'm more exhausted than ever. How do you manage your energy and focus after having kids?
It's a great question. And I think it's a question that everyone with kids can relate to. First, I think in my experience, it was a matter of readjusting to the way that I give my energy away, and the way I understand my energy. But because before I had kids, it just didn't matter. If I was up really late one night, I was like, okay, I'll just like sleep the next day. So there was a way of, understanding to be really clear of what gives me energy and what doesn't give me energy, and to put the boundaries up for that, and to be in a relationship with myself that just had to change. So to begin with, I was more exhausted because it was new and I was adjusting to the whole motherhood gig. But I'd say like one of the biggest things for me is the fact that my relationship that I had with creativity before I had kids. So Virginia Woolf has this really good expression of when she talks about creativity. So she will has this picture of where she's out on the field working, and then suddenly an idea for a poem comes rolling by. She can hear it in the faint. So she's like, oh, I forgot my pen and paper. So she has to run to get to her house, because before the idea sort of rolls past her, she has to catch it before it leaves her. And I used to have that sort of relationship with creativity, where I just like overindulge. Like as soon as I got an idea or like a download of some sorts, I would just like, yes, continue, and I create, and whatever it would be. If it like I wanted to like fix flowers, I would like spend hours fixing flowers or write or whatever. And then I had Ava, and I just couldn't, like, so I would sit there and she would play with something when she was very little, and an idea would come to me, and I'd be like, I need to do this now, because otherwise this idea would leave me. And I had to get into a conversation with creativity. So I would be like, look, I have to have faith that you come to me for a reason. I cannot indulge in you right now, but if you can come back at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock when my daughter's in sleep, then we can talk. And to begin with, I had a lot of fear with this. I was like, oh, I forgot the idea. It's not going to come back. But then as I sort of continued to practice this a bit, this conversation actually started to work. It's like boundary setting, even with yourself, like not just with other people, but with yourself and the relationship you have with the creativity. So, but that's just one of the things that you can feel exhausted by and have more focus on, or lose harder to have focus on. But depends on, it could be so many things that exhaust you when you have a child. So it's a big question. And I know that a lot of the other questions also sort of cover into this as well.
You know what? This brings up, I remember reading, I don't know if I've mentioned this to you, but I'll say it again, years ago in another life. I don't know, maybe it was like 10 years ago. At this point, I love Lady Gaga. But in this moment, I read an interview that Lady Gaga had, and they asked her about motherhood and what she thought about motherhood. And it made me hate Lady Gaga. Like I said, I think she's a beautiful being right now. But in this moment, I was just like, oh, I'm going to stop supporting her because I can't believe that was her response. And the question was, what do you think about motherhood? And she said that she didn't agree with motherhood or something like this because you lose all of your creativity. And I remember being like, but I feel like if anything, you are actually creating someone. So actually, it's the ultimate form of creativity. And if your reaction is that, then I now that I can reflect, my look is now at society for making her feel that way as a woman, with her connection to motherhood, and how when you have a kid, then you lose all of your creativity. And so I just remember being like, I don't agree with that. And in that moment, of course, I took it out on Lady Gaga. But now that I'm more wise, I realize that it is the societal pressure that makes women and parents feel like they lose their creativity, or they don't have time to be in communion with their creativity. So I love that you're speaking about this as a conversation with your own self about how to engage in your creativity. And I'd love to just pass the mic to you to see your response on that.
I love that. I have actually saw the comment that Lady Gaga had, what you're saying, and I forgot about it. And it's so beautiful, because I think, how is it like now in this world when we tend to have kids later? And I'm sure that for a lot of people, so you've already sort of built up a lot of your own self-governance of your own time, and you have your ideas of how you want to live your life. And it must be harder and harder to then introduce a child into your life, because you just like, the doctrine is how much you have to give up and how much you have to become a mother, and not just, your person. But first of all, you are your person, and then you become a mother. And I think I think it's really sad. I think it scares away a lot of people from having kids that would be amazing parents, and that also a lot of people who still have kids put themselves into a box of thinking that they can't indulge in their creativity. But you can, but it just looks different. And I would say in my experience that I have more creativity, and I know how to birth it better, because I know how to, like, I can't just, before I just had endless time. I could just sit with it. And sometimes just time just expands when you have all the time. But now I'm like, I get an idea and I do something and I have to pick up my daughter at kindergarten or school. I'm like, okay, I have 3 hours. Let's get the shit out, you know? So there is like a structure to the creativity that I am forced to, and I'm really grateful for in motherhood. I'm curious,
Absolutely.
like if what everyone's experience is with precisely that, what we're talking about now.
Yeah, I'm going to flag some things folks are writing in the chat box, and I encourage everyone to write their responses as well. For now, I'll read what Nicole has written in response to my Lady Gaga. And by the way, if Lady Gaga ever listens to this, I love you. You are queen. And I love that you helped me realize something about creativity and motherhood, 10 years ago. And anyway, so moving on.
Maybe we helped her a mindset shift for Lady Gaga. Soon she'll have 5 kids.
Okay, so Nicole writes, oh, wow, I feel like you lose being a woman, being a mom. In society, we talk about how men are so sexy with children and moms are always played out as tired and naggy. And don't forget the wine culture as a mom. So I'd love to hear you touch on that. Because we used to drink a lot. We like wine. We don't say no to wine.
Why live in Argentina if you don't like wine? I mean, I think, well, I'll speak to this a little bit because I am a single mom. So I have this, it's like my daughter's dad has never been present. So in terms of that, I feel like every time as a single mom, you're just expected to just do it. But if I see someone who's like 50% single dad, they're like, oh, they're such heroes. They're just so amazing. And then you just go there like with your saggy breasts and tiredness. And you're like, what? Like I do this all the time, you know? So I so can relate to that.
And
But I think there is nothing more sexy than it does. You don't have to be a mom, but there is nothing more sexy with a woman that has just lives her truth and just don't take yourself so seriously. And often when you become a mom, you just don't have time to put on all the makeup and think about how you look like. So often moms are like the sexiest things because they're like, I had this experience with one of my friends and I was walking, like, I think my hair was like, I don't know, off the charts. And I was like chewing this thing and like suddenly it just fell out of my mouth. And later on in the day, I was like, this was when my daughter was like really young. I was drinking and water and I missed my mouth, you know, in the same day. I was so tired. And she was like, I don't think I've ever seen you more attractive than this.
That's great. And you need those friends, those mirrors that are like there to remind you, like, look, you got a hole in your mouth, but I love you the same. It's all good. I want to just talk a little bit about, if we could stay, we'll move on to these questions in a minute, but I want to kind of generate some response from our live callers as well. I mean, if we could make a big change right now with the way that our society is set up, let's take education, for example, right? And I know that you have Ava is starting kindergarten and she has started in different countries, and you get to see how different countries, approach education, how they approach nutrition, how they approach family mindset, all these things. I would love to just hear everyone's opinion on the call about just any societal norms that should be shaken up, especially now that we have a chance because there's so much uncertainty. I'll just throw one out and say education. I love talking about education and that we always get the A side of education and not the B side. And so Ava is multiracial, multinational, just speaking about your particular journey, V. And it's in the dichotomy of you coming from a small town in Norway, and then you went and left the world. And so then you have this child who has all these different parts of herself to consider, and then in the news we have, all of these huge disruptive concepts that end up hurting a lot of people, like racism. And I would say racism is a concept because it is a mindset. You think that someone is inferior because of the color of their skin, and like everyone buys in on that. And then the society is structured to say, yeah, Black people are X, Y, and Z. How can I'm going in a long way to just ask this question. How can we be more mindful when raising our kids, or for someone like me who doesn't have a kid, how can we be more mindful in our communities to work, I don't want to say against that, but just provide another platform to where they know that they have other options and that they can see the world more holistically?
I'll just start talking while we're waiting for hopefully some more viewpoints. But it's a huge question, as you know, Mariella, but I would say that everything goes back to yourself. So for me, becoming a mom was a really huge transformation and a big catapult to being more true to myself. Not that I wasn't before, but it's such a like punch in the face, like the structure that you put up for yourself, and I guess the comforts that you created that creates corners that you can hide in. You don't necessarily get them in the same way when you have a child. So I was confronted with that, but also in a very positive way, because what triggers me more than anything, and what makes me more like what I'm more passionate about, so in a general terms than anything, is to understand the human experience, who we are, why we put limitations on ourselves, how some people manage to just do and grow and others who are equally as talented don't, or and what is all this fear that we create around ourselves, which is what perpetuates a lot of the social issues that we have now. So this is what's also like the backdrop of my keen interest in travel and my keen interest in anthropology. I was growing up and I was asking questions about the world. I was like, why is it like this? Why is it organized like that? Why do we have to sit still at school? Why can't we be more outside? Why can't we, all these questions that I had. And I would ask them to my teachers, I would ask them to my parents, and very often the answer was like, that's just the way things are. And that just didn't suffice for me. And here comes the internet at the time of when I was a teenager, and I was searching and I was finding all these things. And I was like, all right, that's it. I am a vegetarian. All right, that's it. This is horrible what's going on with Israel and Palestine. Okay, and I was like finding out all these things and like, how can we change it? So that's always been something that's been really fundamental to me as a person. But to do that and to really go deep in that with yourself, you have to be really honest with your own demons and your own traumas. And that can be a hard thing. But I think if you really want to see, like one of the questions that you asked in the beginning, Mariella, was the whole, how can we all as a collective, be a mom or not? And other moms who are not moms to my daughter, how can we create kids or create spaces for kids where they can blossom and be who they are? Because I think looking at the human journey through my daughter, like this is my first real experience of seeing someone up close and seeing the birth of a child and seeing how she adapts to different culture and how she learns things. It's such a humbling experience, and it's such a place where I'm like, we are destroying so much of the beauty in kids. They come in like innately magical and curious, and in school, for example, they're taught to sit still, listen. They're taught that to put authority outside of themselves. And I think that's really scary, So one of the things that I really want to teach my daughter is that she has a superpower. She has many, but she has like one superpower is it's her intuition, it's her feelings. No one can take away from her what she feels, and that will be her truth. And then the journey would be to get as close as possible to sort of strip the layers of a lineage and trauma and all the things that we are carrying, so that we can be present for our kids, so that they can become much more conscious citizens of the world. Because we see it so much now in politics, where there is a lot of, we vote in leaders that doesn't serve us, and why do we do that?
And people who are disconnected from their own intuition, essentially, and we're putting the authority in these folks. I'm going to do a little show and tell because it rings true to what you're saying. This is one of my favorite books, Women Who Run with Wolves. The myths and stories of the wild woman archetype. So great. When I cracked this book open, I was on the bus in Buenos Aires. I was crying. I was like, this is like a Bible for me. I've never heard anyone speak to me in this way, and specifically women. And I think all people, not just women, it would be great to read this book so that we can realize how it has been stripped away from us, the authority that we have based on our intuition. And you say that it's this magical power, but it's very real as well. It's magical and it's very palpable. I'm wondering if anyone has any other books like this to recommend. I would love for you to write in the chat box and let us know.
And I just also wanted to add, like, because this book and some of the things that we're talking about, and often a lot of what I see in the sort of conversation now is like so much like, you know, women are the leaders, power to women, all of that. And I'm like, there is lots of brilliant moms and dads who are raising boys, you know. So what is the next generation of that as well? So just to include that boys are equally as much running with wolves if they are taught to run with wolves. Just that.
Absolutely. You know. Absolutely. Absolutely. I would love to know who on the call has kids, girls, boys, gender neutral. Let us know, because we have a whole lot to unpack there. We've got about 30 minutes left, so I just want to let everyone know. I told you the time would fly by, so go ahead and write in the chat box. We have Nicole saying that she has a young son. He has a lot of energy, and she has a lot of energy. So, and then you're told to sit still in work and in school. So how do you fight against that? Let's move on to the next question here, just so that we can keep the momentum going. And again, I encourage everyone to write in the chat box and to hop off of mute as well. So V, can you talk about how you've been able to travel around the world and pursue your passions while having a family and navigating motherhood? And earlier you said that you're a single mom, and I learned on a chat that I did last year with PowerToFly, this woman just so seamlessly said, I'm an independent mom. I'm not single, because again, society does this thing where it implies, because you're not in a partnership, because, you know, the other parent decided to not be involved, and, you know, I guess they have a right to do that, but with the morality of how society is, you know, if you don't step up and wear the pants of being a father or wear the pants of being a mother, then you're seen as, I don't know, all the things that we could talk about there. But I would encourage all of us to be mindful of our language. And V, of course, you're so mindful with your language all the time. And it's just that the things that we're taught with being repetitive and like saying that we are single, which assumes that we're lacking something, essentially. And you and I often talk about the power of language. And I'll also say that V is a coach. She's a dear friend of mine, but she's also a coach. And so she helps me get my mind right and see things from a different way. And I started specifically during the pandemic. And honestly, I'm so honored to work with you, because you really do help me see things from a macro level and a micro level. And you challenge me to ask myself and reflect on how I can raise myself, essentially. I know we're talking about kids here, but how do we raise our inner child? How do we raise ourselves to honor ourselves? And I'm just going to throw that out there, that V is a great resource for that. I'm also going to read some things we have in the chat box, so you can consider this as you respond to this question. So we've got, let's see, Megan has a 5-year-old boy and 3 stepkids. Nicole has a young son. Maru has 1 boy and 1 girl. Ray has a young son that I have a hard time keeping up with as well, LOL. Melissa has 7-year-old twins. Clara has a 10-year-old boy. Great. And Jordan, no children, just listening and learning. Me too. So again, V, I'd love to hear you respond.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's my privilege to be your coach, Mariella. It's super, super fun. And in terms of the wording of single mom, I don't feel like it's disempowering to me to say that, or solo mom, or independent mom. So to me, I don't mind being single either. Like, it's nothing less than, you know, me and my daughter, we're a perfect family, and maybe more will come in. I have other families. So it's, you know, whatever floats anyone's boat, I guess. But to answer the question about travel and pursuing passions while navigating motherhood, I think travel, in my terms, like I've done this traveling me and my daughter alone. So I think there's some really positive aspects about that. Like, often, like, being a solo parent like has a bad rep, but some really positive things about it. Is really easy for me to, like, okay, that's it, we're gonna travel, because I have done so much travel before I became a mom. So I don't have to consider now another partner, like, is it good enough for, like, does he want to move? What sort of work will he do? And I can just like feel it in terms of me and my daughter, and then we can go. So that makes it very sort of liberating. And for pursuing passions. So again, like what I said, one of my like main passions is human experience. And so that's like the best thing to do when you're traveling. And I would say travel with children versus travel without kids. Like I've traveled with my daughter to a lot of places that I've traveled to before I had her. It just adds a whole new perspective to the place. You get access to other types of conversation and other groups of society, and you see society in very different ways, which is super fun. And in terms of, I guess, like in this context, I guess it's terms of money making, your passions like generate money for you. I find that when I do something that feels right to me, like travel and changing up the state that I'm in, I often get much more focused. So for me, my aim is to do work that I can do online. So when I, for example, lived with my daughter in Argentina, I did a course in microblading. Why won't you? So I did something totally different. So I did that a little bit for work, and then I did online work, consulting work. And it just depends on where I've been and what I have done. Yeah.
I love that. And you get to see the world with a new lens, a fearless child that asks you to run around with her, in the sense. I mean, I have seen you all run around the busy streets of Buenos Aires and being like, whoo,
you should have seen my parents when they came to visit and saw like her running down the street. And I'm like, I knew she would stop at the end of the street. And my dad like nearly had a heart attack. He was like, ah!
Oh, okay. So we've got Clara here who has written, I'm a solo parent too, and I agree it has its advantages too. Deciding on your own education, own rules, for example, and the connection between us is really strong.
Yes. Yay. I like that. I'm really like adamant at saying like it often has such a bad rep, as if you're always lacking something. And it's like, no, because things will come to you when things come to you. And I think it must be amazing to be in a relationship with someone if the relationship is good, and to share it. And like, it must be so beautiful, but it's also beautiful to be one-on-one with your child. I think there has another host of issues, like.
Of course. So can you speak to, since you are a solo parent, can you speak to the importance of community as far as, let's say, shameless plug, I'm your friend. And I would, for example, let you and Ava be yourselves and not ask you to be more, I don't know, whatever it is, quiet or more cleaner or whatever it is that is like really impossible. No, because I say in my experience with some families, they ask their kid who clearly wants to be expressing themselves to not express themselves. And I've seen you beautifully allow Ava to express themselves. And I contribute to that. I try to contribute to that as a part of your community. So I guess my bigger question is what is the importance of the community that you surround yourself with when you are either a solo parent or when you do have a partnership, so that the child is able to be free?
Well, I think it's super important. And I don't think you necessarily like it is for if you have a partner as well, sharing a child. But what I think is very interesting it wasn't really your question, but what you were touching on, that this thing that I think that I had a little bit when I became a mom, and I think definitely the generation before us, was this parenting thing. You had to make your child sit still and be quiet and eat your food and all of that, and the things that we sort of adapt a little bit now and we have frictions with. But what are we essentially teaching our kids with it's a difficult thing, because it's really hard as a parent when your kid hasn't eaten that much and you're like, oh, please just eat the broccoli, and then you go 3 more spoons, and if you don't eat that, then you won't get that. But what you're essentially if we're thinking about not just like one time of doing it or 2 times, we're human, we do it. But I notice when I array more to the side of how I want to be as a mom is when I am stressed and not so in tune with myself. So when I can sort of get my equilibrium, then it's easier for me to go, okay, if you're full, then I want you to trust your own gut, because I want that for her when she's older, to not overeat, to feel when she's hungry. So I try to sort of, okay, that's fine. You don't have to eat more of that now. That's fine. And then later on, she will be like, I'm hungry. And then she can eat. but it's not like a clear cut as easy, but it helps me also to take away some of the control that I have in myself. And so it liberates more of my easygoingness in terms of it. But I'm like, okay, I am with this on this journey with my daughter, and I don't try to control her. So therefore, I also feel more aligned with who I am, and I have a better relationship with her. And then I'm thinking long run, like, what am I teaching her? Like, if I tell her to be quiet, for example, when we're at a place, it depends. Like, if she's screaming, then we can have a conversation like, how do you think that they feel if you're screaming? But if it's just like kids play and stuff, then often it's parents will say it to their kids because they think that that's what other people around them will judge them for. And so what I care more about is like my relationship to my daughter, not if someone else judges us if she's like a little bit too loud or just didn't sit still at the table. But it's not a clear-cut answer, because I know as a parent, you're like, it would be easier if they just behaved,
Yes.
But
And what does it mean to behave? What are you condoning?
raising?
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Small
And I
parents
love that.
are in contact with themselves. They put governance and authority outside of themselves.
Yes. No. And I use that as an example because it's like when I see certain parents do that, I mean, even in my own family, and I encourage, like, I taught my niece how to spit, and I was like shunned for doing that. But I'm like, well, she needs to learn how to spit out ice, and then she thought it was fun. And of course she's not spitting all over everything, but she's like, don't teach her. She's a girl. It's like, hey, but you know what? She needs to learn how to spit. And I'm going to be the auntie that's going to teach her how to spit, for example. And I don't care if the society tells me that I'm doing wrong. But I've seen you also just be, so let's just take it to a very like material experience. So Ava is 6 and she decides that she wants to be a vegetarian. How, for example, something as big as that, can you talk a little bit about that? Because you're essentially already disrupting something that we are taught as far as nutrition is concerned, and how you should feed your kid, and how all these things that we think should happen. And I was just taken aback with how Ava, she eats, well, and she eats the way that she wants. And she, even though she's, half Argentine, and Argentina is known for their beef, she should be eating meat, right? Because she comes from this meat country, but she decides not to. Can you just speak a little bit about that? Because I found so much power in seeing her decide. And also she's strong and healthy, and she's like breaking down all of these stigmas as a 6-year-old.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that everyone needs to figure out what is the right diet for their family, and I encourage, if it's a diet or whatever, work or whatever you're doing, to figure out is this aligned with who I am, like ethically and physically, and like, does this work for me? So I figured out when the onset of internet and I understood about the animal production, I was like, no, I'm not. So I became a vegetarian. So I have been a vegetarian obviously for a long time, and then I was pregnant, didn't eat any meat. And didn't give her any meat. No, so she's obviously, I think that she's decided this for herself, but she's also obviously been influenced in the logic that I have created for her, obviously, like all kids are. But I see for her, it's not something that is like, it's something that she has really embraced, and it's such a part of her, and she's so proud of it. And so in kindergarten, like I would sometimes overhear her sitting, they used to sit like 4 and 4, and she would sit there and be like the influencer of the group, who's like, did you know that that piece of meat was an animal? And then you see the kids are like what? Like, they're like shocked, like they haven't, their parents haven't told them the link, and then they go back and they talk to their parents, and about like 50% of the cases they come back, and then some of the kids like, I don't care, I love it, so I'm gonna eat it. Like, some of the kids are like that, and then about other 50% are like, I can't, like, I love these animals, I can't eat. So, and then the parents will be like, okay, this is a bit of a big thing, but maybe if we cut down, and then they're on the journey with their kids, So it's beautiful. It's like listening to the kids, and then they get to try it, and then they feel it. And then I also have like the the pedagogical leader of the group, the kindergarten that my daughter went to in Argentina. That was like pure like meat. And they used to tell me like, I don't believe that kids should not eat meat. And they were like really adamant on this. But she's now introduced vegetarianism to her family because she was like, I just never thought that you kids could eat a vegetarian diet and still be healthy. And then she saw my daughter, and yeah. So this is like no judgment. I think everyone needs to figure out what's right for their kids, but it's definitely one of the things that and a lot of other things that I want to have conversations with her about. And then that so that she figures out what's the right thing for her to do. If she later on, like she probably wants to later on, like she'll be curious, she wants to try, then I go, yes, that's your choice. Like,
yeah, you give her the choice. I love that you give her choice and that she owns that, and she is fueling the way that she decides to be herself essentially in the world. So it's great to see, I mean, just with that one example, to see this advice that you're sharing in your experience and you're implementing that into, you know, your life and your family, and to see that shine through your child. So thank you for sharing that. I know that's an intimate part of your journey, but I just wanted to say that I was also like, whoa, I've never seen this before. Let's move on to the next question here. So at any point, did you feel overwhelmed or burdened by motherhood?
Yes and yes. So if anyone who's a mom disagree with me on this one, I don't know, like you need to explain to me how you do it. I think it's just normal, like we all do. I think like it's physically, like when you have a child, like, you know, breastfeeding, you're with your child all the time. Like my daughter just like wasn't a fan of sleeping. It was like, what is this, you know? So of course, when it's overwhelming, especially to begin with, it felt very overwhelming. But it felt also very overwhelming because I realized that I was trying to control it somehow. I was like reading all these things and all these self-help things, and if only I did that, and if only I did that, then the child would sleep. And I tested it and it didn't work. And it was only when I sort of begun to release a lot of the control and just surrender to what is going to happen and being in the present, you know, real sort of meditative state, that I found more peace with it, and was like, then I could notice, okay, this is actually quite beautiful. It's okay. Things are okay, you know, so I could release more. But every now and then, obviously, I feel burdened and overwhelmed by it. I think having a child who doesn't have a present dad, like I feel sadness for my daughter. That's like I think everyone's experienced mom guilt, where I'm like, oh, I work too much, I should have taken her out of, you know, all these, like there's so much of a dialogue that goes in your head when you're a mom. Like you're constantly worried, like constantly thinking, is she playing with someone, is she not playing with someone in school, is it okay, does she like it, is it a good like it's just relentless. So it's very easy to feel overwhelmed as a mom, and that's why I think it's very important to find the spaces as best as you can where you can find your balance again. That was really hard for me when she was really little, because I was breastfeeding her. I couldn't really get away, and it was intense. And now I have more of a space to also do other things, but also it's so much more fun to be with her now. No offense, babies are cute, but it's, you know, when you have conversations and stuff, oh, so much fun.
Nice. I see some folks shaking their heads. So that's nice that you have some folks echoing that sentiment. So just to dive a little deeper on this question, because you and I often talk about this, the dilemma of the workforce, let's say, in the 21st century, and how, you know, the workforce is driven on this hustle mentality and data and numbers and productivity. So I would love to hear you speak a little bit about, you know, the parent that feels overwhelmed and burdened in tandem with their work that is helping them feel that way, and how you would advise them to find the balance. Because I love that you're bringing this back to balance and self-reflection through a lot of these questions that you're responding to. So just throwing that there with how can we be more mindful and find more balance in with, you know, the way that the workforce is telling us what productivity looks like and what growth looks like and what it is to be a successful worker, also being a mother.
Well, question it. Like question the logic and the truth that's being presented to you, question it and feel how it sits in you. So I think a lot of, and then in terms of your work, feel your work. Do you love your work? Or is it just something you're doing to pay your money, or pay your income? And sometimes we go through seasons where that's called for. We need to make money, we need to pay our bills. But could we find ways then, if it's a job that is not a hell yes, to sort of find new ways? Could we do part-time something else? Could we do part-time a course? Could we find other things? Because I think that's really essential when you talk about sort of the work-life balance. It's if you love your career, if you love your job, and then that will give you energy, rather than being in the job that sucks it from you. So then you're trying to figure out a way to get work-life balance. I hear this all the time, but you don't really want to have work-life balance because you don't want to have your job. So you need to start with the premise and take it by the root and plant some new seeds. But then if you have a job that you really love, you still can be overwhelmed, And then a lot of people I see have a lot of activities for their kids. They go on this thing on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday and Thursday, they do something else. So you're just like a shuttle traffic parent. And then maybe you should cut a few of these activities as well, figure out that sort of balance. And another thing that I have found really useful in terms of work with my daughter is to include her. And that obviously depends on your work. So if you work as a ER surgeon, maybe it doesn't work so well to have your 2-year-old running around in the operation, but for a lot of other works you can. And one thing is that you bring your kids to work every now and then just for a little bit. But another thing is that you talk to your kids about the job that you do, because often, I know this from my upbringing, I didn't really know what my parents were doing. I didn't know how their days were like. I didn't really know what made them happy in terms of their work and what worried them. And I don't think that you should, as a parent, for me at least, it doesn't sit well to put on my worries on my daughter, but also to be this was sometimes, at work, I wasn't sure how to solve this task, and I wasn't sure if I was going to do it. It didn't go as well as I thought. And then on the flip side, I would tell her also, this was amazing. Today was so good. I did this and that. And I would bring her. So in Bali, I'm producing clothes and jewelry. So I would bring her for selecting fabrics and jewelry designs and stuff like that. And so months later, she would be picking shells on the beach with a friend. And she's like, we have to help my mom because she's making jewelry. Maybe she can make something from these shells. And so suddenly she's my business partner, and it's so fun. And so then it's not, because I so believe that instead of thinking about this work-life balance, why about trying to find work that we really enjoy and that our kids can grow and enjoy with as well? And so they can merge together more rather than there's two separate entities and something we do just to work towards the weekend,
I love that. One of my favorite philosophers, Alan Watts, speaks about this dilemma. Is the modern family, this was during the I think it was during the 50s or 60s. So, you had industrialization coming in and all the advertising. It's dad's away for almost all day and all he wants to do is come home and relax. But then he has his kid there and the kid is where have you been all day? And it's just this distraction. It's a slice of life, literally, not owning or not showing, not participating. It's interesting to see how you involve Ava in your work. I just want to flag a couple of things that are coming up in the chat box. So Megan writes, I think this is a challenge now more than ever with many kids home from school and trying to juggle everything at home. I'd love to hear you speak on this, Bea.
Yeah. Hi, Megan. I know Megan. And she has many more kids than me. She's a bonus mom as well. And COVID, it's a whole other ball game. I am so grateful that schools opened again in Norway in August. So because we were living in Bali, and she went to kindergarten there, and then COVID happened and we were supposed to stay longer, but COVID happened. So I thought it was better that we sort of ride this out at home to see what it was. And then she couldn't get into a kindergarten in Norway because they were all in the nearby, they were all full. But she was going crazy. The first month was okay. And then after that, she was I need to play with kids. I need to and we were allowed to be outside and we had nature. So we went out and we did things, but she was I am all alone. I need to play with kids. It was she was going crazy. And so eventually when she could start school, it was whew. So I'm feeling for you, Megan, and everyone else who's in Argentina, and I know other countries as well, who schools are still closed and there's more restrictions on how you're moving. I think, like, you know, like exactly what to do is that you have to, I guess I believe it comes with you though. It's easy to tell your kids that you know, you could tell your kids that, okay, everything will be fine, don't worry about it. But if you're not really feeling it yourself, then it's hard to convince your kids about something you don't really feel yourself. So do the work and do the mindset work of everything comes in seasons, and this too will pass, and sort of cling onto that with everything that you have.
Absolutely. I love that
Play board
advice.
games and puzzles and stuff. I don't know.
Yes. And if you're live joining us and you found like a tip or a trick, you know, and your kid is not back in school, please write that in the chat box so we can share that wealth of knowledge. I see some folks laughing. Clara, I'm real. Share your tips. I know you got some. I have a private message here that I want to flag, and I'd love to hear your response on this. So speaking about work-life balance, I love my job, but I feel like work-life balance doesn't exist, especially since no one else on my immediate team doesn't have kids. So they'll be like, wow, that's tough, but I feel like they're not necessarily understanding. It's just really tough. And I wonder if I'm putting a lot of external pressure on myself.
Probably, because that doesn't sound like a very good employer either. You know, like it's demanding to have kids, and you need to go and pick them up at a certain time. You can't just work overtime, or, you know, so you need to have the space to also be there for your kids. And it's a horrible conundrum to be in when you feel like you just don't have enough time and energy for your kids, because you want them to be your first priority.
So what can this person do maybe starting tomorrow? Is it have a conversation with the workplace? Is it have a conversation with themselves? What do you recommend?
I would maybe do a little bit of a overview of what are the things that are taking your energy during the day, and seeing if there's some of these things that you could eliminate out. For now, it doesn't mean that you have to eliminate them out forever, but understand that maybe certain times in your life it's more draining than other times. So see if there's things you can, you know, get out. And then I obviously don't know what sort of work it is, but in work I find that batch working is very practical suggestion. But batch working, where you, instead of trying to do like a lot of things at the same time, because you often end up doing that thinking that we can multitask, but in reality we can't really multitask. So batch work, where you say, look, the next, say this person is working with social media or something, so the next 2 hours I'm only going to write captions, and then put the timer on, have a little break and shake, and then write it down, and then other times for batch work. And then when you've looked through the work that you have to do, and see if you can organize it so that you become a bit more efficient in the work itself, I would also go through it and see in terms of if there are things that you can change up, and have a conversation with your boss about it. Like, do I really need to do these things? Can we do this in a different way? Because this is how I'm feeling.
I love that, because it's I mean, one of the parts of the title of this chat is embracing the magic of motherhood. And so there are probably some things that we have to do differently when we start to have kids, or when we start to be more involved with kids, right? And in order to discover that magic. So I guess, and you always speak with me about, you know, when you are experiencing resistance, that's a moment to expand and develop. I'd love for you to talk about this in that light, as far as resistance, and what do you do going forward?
Yeah, I get like super excited every time I talk to Mariella or someone else about when they're like, oh, I feel this and that is yucky. I'm like, yes, it's resistance. So in points of resistance, we're being called to go, is this working for me? If not, how can I change it? So and sometimes like resistance can also be like in a positive way. We're nervous for something because we're going to go from one level to another. And I don't mean this in a hierarchical way, not better or worse, but like we're moving away from something and we're moving to something else, and we feel some sort of resistance. But often it can come like when there's something that just isn't working, you know, in a relationship, and you're like, oh, there's constant things. And it doesn't mean that the relationship has to end, or your relationship with that job has to end. But if the points of resistance continue, there's something that isn't working and it needs to shift up. It needs to change in one way or another.
There's a saying, I don't know the exact quote, but give it to a mother because a mother can do everything and can multitask and to do all of that. And I remember hearing that being like, I don't know if that's like going to be good for the mom, like, but there is this stigma because clearly you see it. I mean, I see it in my mother and I see it in the women who have kids around me and the fathers as well, being able to multitask, but that not meaning that everyone should be multitasking all the time. I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
Well, I think as a mom, like becoming a mom, I honestly don't believe in multitasking so much. Like, I think, you know, like when you're there and you have a dinner with your kids and then other kids as well, and they're talking, yes, you can maybe multitask frying something whilst you're talking. But like in real terms, I think we should be a little bit like careful to sort of idolize the multitasking part of it. But what I would say in terms of being a mom, that I think that is for me at least, and I think for probably all moms, is that it's such a superpower, because before I became a mom, I didn't have a real Achilles heel. Like it opens up a whole world of vulnerability, because you can lose something that you just, it's a very sort of real and raw and honest place to be in. And from there, you just grow so much strength, because you have to surrender to the realness of life, that you have to let your kids fly. You need to let them, give them love and let them fly, and know that there's vulnerability in that.
Absolutely. I'm sharing this last screen just so that we can share the beautiful work that you're doing. And if folks want to get in touch with you and learn more about you or learn with you, I definitely recommend speaking with Viveka as much as you can, because she has helped me be able to negotiate. She's helped me be able to, get my mindset right. And again, I don't have kids, so I imagine, if you do have kids, reaching out to her would be very beneficial. We have 2 minutes left. So can you leave us with some food for thought as we, end this chat and go back into the real world? Leave us with some food for thought, and then let us know how we can be in touch with you.
Well, one of the other questions that we didn't get to now was, what's the best piece of advice someone ever gave you? I thought that was all the questions were really good. I wish we could go through all of them. But I think, like, in terms of motherhood, there is a couple of things that I think were like great advice or great insights. So one of them was like, it's not what you tell your kids, but it's what they see in you, So that sort of opens up and invites you to do the work with yourself. And then another that a friend told me just recently in Bali, he was like, I'm just so adamant that I'm not going to be my child's first bully. And that was also one that was really, really powerful to me, because it was like, when you're stressed, sometimes you just go, you never clean up after yourself, or, you throw out something that you like maybe realize that, this is my mom, this is, something, and then I can catch myself and I'm like, I don't want to be her bully. I want to be her supporter,
Absolutely. Great. So I've had such a great time in this past hour, and I'm lucky because I get to speak with you more and more. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who's joined us for this hour. I saw a lot of heads nodding. I saw a lot of movement in the chat box. So I just appreciate everyone for chiming in. And V, thank you for dropping knowledge. I really appreciate you. All the mamas and the papas in the world, unite. Let's make this world a better place. We got to think of the next generation. And also for folks like me who don't have kids, we need to take part and be responsible as well. So again, we'll see you on the next Chat and Learn. I've learned so much through UV in this chat. So thank you, everyone, and have a nice day.
Thank you. So much fun.